Good morning. It is 11:09 a.m. on Sunday, May 12th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis and been poking around a little bit. Just, getting up slowly. This is 5 more minutes. So first of all, a brief note that it is Mother's Day. So I hope that mothers are something that you are. Well, so I'm trying to be over-inclusive and turning awkward as a result. I hope that if your mother is still, around, you should let her know that what she means to you, unless, of course, you are someone for whom that would be an unhealthy thing to do. And I'm making that. I think for most people, you should. Okay. There's multiple categories here. For people who have a healthy relationship with their mother and their mother is still alive, you should wish your mother a happy Mother's Day. For people whose mothers are not around anymore, and oh God, I made this terrible. It's Mother's Day, so I hope that you spend your Mother's Day in whatever way makes you happy. In the meantime, it's Sunday, so I'm talking about Gravity Falls with the rewatch of Season 2, Episode 4, Sock Opera. Thank you, John. In chat says that final summation was perfect. Great. So I'm very happy to be talking about this episode, though, because once again, it is the return of Bill Cipher, who I just think is extremely cool, is one of the best inventions of this show, I think, just in terms of being this enemy that blends cartoon silliness with con artist tropes with like eldritch horror. I just think that's such a cool combination. It really, pushes my buttons. But in any event, we start the episode with a little bit more development on the main mystery story. We have the laptop that the kids retrieved from the bunker, a couple of episodes back. But now that it's been fixed up by Seuss, they can turn it on. Unfortunately, it's got a password. So Dipper is the one, Dipper and Mabel are helping each other with this, and they're in agreement on that until it gets to a password, so it looks like it's stuck for a little bit, and then Mabel sees Gabe. Gabe, of course, is the cute boy at the library who has puppets on his hands and is doing a puppet show for little kids, teaching them important lessons about literacy. And of course, that's why you don't put your hands in other people's mouths, which is a good lesson. But of course, it's framed as another crush of the week for Mabel. And so Dipper feels a little bit frustrated that she wants to immediately abandon what she was doing, which was helping him with the laptop to chase after this boy. But she presses him and saying, can you just help me with this one thing? She ends up promising him, the Gabe that, oh yeah, I have my own puppet show that I'm putting on and it's amazing and you should come see it. And it's like, now she needs to put together a puppet show. And Dipper's a good brother and he agrees to help her. But he's helping her, but also still pursuing the laptop. And I think to some extent, although Mabel does sort of just abandon Dipper's project for her own without really looking back at all, it's also true that the project is currently at a status of, are you just randomly guessing passwords? Like, you really maybe ought to have a strategy for that, and Dipper's own strategy doesn't necessarily go well, and it's not clear that Mabel would have actually been able to help much with that. But yeah, It's true, though, that he's working on something he feels is very important. She was working with him and promised to continue and then doesn't anymore. So it's fair for him to feel a little abandoned there. But he, just as he accuses her later of being obsessed with her crush of the week, it's true he's obsessed with this too. Now, to some extent, we can understand from his perspective that this laptop seems like it's much more important because it's uncovering the mysteries of Gravity Falls, but it's also true that there's not really any specific external pressure driving him to do this. It's really just his own desire to learn the secrets, right? He has not been given any indication that he's in danger or trouble of any kind. It's just that he wants to know, right? But, that changes to some extent as of this episode. But in any event, we have Mabel preparing to give her sock puppet rock opera and preparing it. And that's lots of fun. And it's also indicated that everyone at the Mystery Shack is helping. Grunkle Stan is kind of not really helping, but he helps in his own way by giving kind of tacit consent for this to occur in his home without objecting too much. It's more like he's like, all right, I am going to choose not to intervene or interfere in this, and maybe they'll leave me alone, that sort of thing, which is kind of fun. But Seuss and Wendy are helping, and Dipper is helping too, even though he is also staying up too late, trying all of these different passwords. And, Dipper at first is on board with this idea of, okay, well, I help you do your rock opera puppet show thing, and then you come back to helping me with the computer, right? And that was the agreement. But then when it seems, we get another visit from Gabe, who is out rollerblading through the forest because it helps dry out his ponytail after he takes a shower. And he's still got the puppets on his hands. And it's kind of funny to imagine that I think that there's a little bit of a fake out in this episode that we might, upon first viewing, wonder if the mysterious element of the show is going to be turning out that, he actually doesn't have hands. Those puppets really are his hands or something like that, because we never see him without the puppets on. But that's all kind of a red herring. But in any event, he gives not only our first indication that he's maybe not that great a guy with his extremely nitpicky, there was this other girl one time who was going to do a puppet show, and I just saw that she used different kinds of stitching on her different puppets, and I just, I immediately took her phone number out of my contact list. And so, of course, that's our indication. Yeah, this guy's maybe, no. But in the meantime, Mabel is now, oh no, we have to redouble our efforts on this, just as Dipper was feeling like, oh, we're almost done with this. So he rejects the idea of working even more on this because he feels like Mabel's kind of reneging on her promise, whereas she's the one that says, oh, you're just obsessed with that dumb computer. And so that's where they sort of split up. And of course, we have... I suppose we had our first visit from Bill Cipher before this too, where Dipper was up late trying to solve the password and gets the visit from Bill on the roof of the Mystery Shack, who promises to Dipper, in very much the same way that we saw him make a deal with Gideon, says, I will give you a hint, is what he says. I will give you a hint with the laptop if you do a favor for me. And that's all he says initially. And Dipper, good for him, is totally like, what? Why would I ever make a deal with you? You're dangerous, you're evil, you're a monster. Why? Go away. There's a really cool bit where Bill tips his hat and it seems to make the whole world tilt around. That's just cool. And the constant, sort of glib silliness of Bill's normal voice, occasionally punctuated with the, I've been keeping an eye on you, and that sort of stuff, is pretty cool. And so Dipper had already rejected Bill's help. But then as we see him, and the show still frames him as being obsessed at this point. We see him like with it's light outside, but he's got the shades drawn and he's sitting there, bags under his eyes from staying up too late. And he's continuing to work on the laptop. And then what I think we would all expect as a likely outcome is that he's tried too many passwords and gotten it wrong too many times. So now the computer promises it's going to do a complete data reset in 5 minutes if you don't enter the password before then. And so now Dipper's desperate. It's got a time clock. And of course, that's when Bill shows up again. And Bill, says, all I want from you, so Dipper's still, hesitant. But what Bill says is, all I want is a puppet. And you have lots of puppets. See, and he's gesturing to all the leftover puppets from Mabel's thing. And so Dipper is tempted, despite his better judgment, just want a puppet, right? And that sort of thing. But I think once he makes the deal, as we might have predicted, Bill is an entity whose deals may as well be totally non-binding from his part, because even though there's a little bit more to this than we realize, because we have to recall, what did Bill promise? He promised to give Dipper a hint. He didn't say, I will help you unlock the laptop. He didn't say, I will help you uncover the secrets within. He said, I will give you a hint. And without spoiling future episodes, we'll say that technically a hint was given to Dipper as part of this whole thing, even though Dipper doesn't realize it yet. But then, of course, Bill smashes or says, my puppet is you. I'm going to puppet your body, which is unexpected, but like literally true. And it's like all these classic stories of trying to make deals with fairies or something like that, where this idea of the wording is so important because maybe they might be bound by the literal wording, but maybe they interpret the words differently than you thought. That sort of thing. Although it's frankly not clear at all that Bill is actually bound by any of these deals in any meaningful way. Like, does he have to keep his promises? It's not necessarily clear that he does, unless he wants to. But in any event, choosing to puppet Dipper's body around, he excuse me, he indicates that this whole thing, him showing up, was actually because you were getting too close for some things. That's why he showed up, is because unlocking the laptop would have been bad for him. You're getting too close. And so like that's kind of a hint also, right? This indication of, oh no. But now he wants to use Dipper's body to go destroy the journal and, wreak whatever other chaos. And there's lots of fun stuff about, Bill saying, oh, pain, in Dipper's body, pain is hilarious, and throwing himself down the stairs, slamming Dipper's arm in the kitchen drawer, all of those sorts of things. Is like, look, I'm going to drink human soda like humans do. And he's like pouring it all over his face. All of that, silly stuff. And, Dipper is horrified, having to follow in like this ghostly form, unable to interact with anything. And then there is actually kind of an extended sequence where Dipper is, increasingly realizing how bad this situation is, because as much as he's horrified initially, it just keeps getting worse. Like he keeps seeing like his friends is like, hey, help me. But he realizes they can only see Bill Dipper, and they don't realize anything is wrong. And so, this is also where we have Dipper promising, it's like, I'll never tell you where the journal is, but then we realize Mabel, for her rock opera, just took the journal without even asking. She does say, I grabbed the journal. And so she does take it without asking, but she also does let him know. Unfortunately, she lets him know in a way that Bill overhears it and therefore, knows where it is. And so the whole sequence here is this race where Dipper in the ghost form has to try to catch up with Bill Dipper, aka Bipper, according to Mabel, which is great. So, Bipper is trying to get to the journal, and Ghost Dipper is trying to stop him. And would Ghost Dipper be Gipper? That creates some associations that are probably not what we're looking for. But in any event, we see that the rock opera is incredibly elaborate because Mabel is actually a creative genius when she can actually set her mind to something for more than 5 minutes at a time. And so we see Gabe in the front row actually really impressed. And so we have this scene where Dipper, finally realizing what Bill meant when he says you have to possess a vessel, possesses the sock puppet version of himself, which is very fun. And it's exciting when we have Mabel sort of can't help but laugh, and it's like, I'm sorry, you look funny when you're mad, and the sock puppet does that whole sort of Kermit mad, and there's a great gif of that. That's one of the common Gravity Falls gifs if you Google that. In any event, though, we have Gabe showing up to indicate that he's very pleased with the rock opera so far, and if you stick the landing, then maybe we'll go out for a biscotti. And then Mabel says, you drive a biscotti, which is pretty fun. But it also just sets these stakes, right? And it's this position where when Bill was tempting Dipper, part of what he said about all of that is, when has Mabel ever given up anything she wanted to help you? You do it all the time, but she has never done it to help you. And to some extent, we can see that, there's been certainly more times where Dipper has done that for Mabel than the other way around. But here we see Mabel in this position of she's unwilling to fully commit, but hey, Dipper, if you control the puppets to keep the rock opera going for me, I will go get the journal. And so she's making a compromise, but not fully giving up. But then, of course, once she gets the journal, but she's falling out of this prop cake, and so it's presented now. Bill has her at his mercy and is saying, you either give me the journal or I drop you in this big prop cake onto the set, and it will ruin your show. And he is very confident that she will do that because, of course, from his perspective, she has already chosen to value her show above what her brother wants. But this is where he frames it, and it's this great, cathartic moment where he frames it as, who would ever give up, something they've worked so hard on, just to, protect a sibling. And she realizes Dipper would. And so she decides she'll do it too. Chaos ensues. There's a fight with Mabel and Bipper where he's claiming to have no weaknesses, but she realizes now that he's in Dipper's body, he has Dipper's weaknesses. And so that's fun. She tickles him. She takes advantage of the fact that Dipper hadn't slept in over 24 hours and was exhausted, and all of these sorts of things. And so Bill is expelled from Dipper's body. Dipper's able to, reunite with his own body. And it's a great moment where he says, "Yay, I'm back in my own body." And it's just as underwhelming as I remembered. That's pretty fun. And so we get to that bit, and there's a nice play on the idea of, I've seen enough movies to know that everyone will think all this chaos was just part of the show and love it. And the answer is, of course, they don't. They say, oh, that show that we were enjoying turned into a chaotic mess, and it's obviously ruined. And so they are all mad and leave, including Gabe. But Gabe goes out, walks out of the theater, making out with his own puppets. And so it's like, yeah, maybe dodged a bullet there. But Bill now expelled and defeated for the moment, promises he'll be back. There's even worse coming. And there's nicely ominous and foreshadowing. But we have now Mabel with having made a distinct choice to help her brother above her own, current obsession. And so it's a nice moment. We got lots of fun stuff with Bill being a legitimately scary and dangerous opponent. And yeah, good episode. So I'll go ahead and leave it there for today, but then I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.